cosine graphs. I hope everyone knows what a cosine graph looks like. The cosine graph looks something like it repeats itself forever. There's one period of it. And normally it goes from 0 to 2 pi. Amplitude, it goes up to 1, down to -1. I'm just going to look at this part of the graph. -1/2 cosine of 2x. That, the negative, rotates it around the x-axis. So then now it's going to be something like this. The 1/2 changes that amplitude. So instead of 1, it's going to go up to 1/2 and down to -1/2. And my period, this was a period right here, period is 2 pi over b. B is 2. So it's pi. So start with my initial points then. Beginning and end are usually the maxes, but now they're the minimums. So, because it rotated around the x-axis. So 0, -1/2, and the period was pi, negative, oops, that's -1/2. The middle, pi over 2, is now your maximum at 1/2. 1/4 of the way, there'll be a 0, and 3/4 of the way, there'll also be a 0. So 1/4 of pi is pi over 4. And 3/4 of the way is 3 pi over 4. Now, I'm going to write these points a little bigger. I might go to extend the page because it's really hard to read these points because I'm trying to write them small and fit them in. So let me rewrite them again. So I'm going to erase it and see if I can rewrite them again. So my points are 0, -1/2, and pi, -1/2. In the middle, there'd be a maximum. So pi over 2, +1/2. 1/4 of the way through, pi over 4. There's a 0, and 3/4 of the way through, there's another 0. There, you can read those better. Now let's do my movement. Minus pi over 2 moves it to the right, pi over 2. So I'm going to add a positive pi over 2 to the right. -3 there moves it down 3. You can think of it with the y, because if I added it to the other side, it would be y plus 3 is equal to. It's with the y, opposite of positive is negative, so -3. So I'm going to add that point to all of my points. So my new points are, my first one will now be pi over 2, comma, -1/2 minus 3 is -3/2. Pi over 4 plus pi over 2, you need a common denominator, so that pi over 2, call it 2 pi over 4 plus pi over 4 gives you 3 pi over 4, -3. So that's that point. The next one, pi over 2 plus pi over 2 gives you pi. -3 plus 1/2 gives you -2/2. The next point, 3 pi over 4 plus 2 pi over 4 gives me 5 pi over 4. 0 plus a negative 3 is negative 3. And pi plus pi over 2, you can think of pi as 2 pi over 2 plus another pi over 2 gives you 3 pi over 2. Negative 3 minus a half is negative 3 and 1/2. So now if you were doing that, I'm going to get rid of this because I'm having trouble graphing it on there, but I will try to graph it on another. I'll try to draw my own. Let's see if I can do that. If I were graphing it, I would graph it by force. I'll just do that right there. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's pi. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 2 pi. And let's graph them. So pi over 2, negative 3.5 might put me right about there. 3 pi over 4. Negative 3 might put me right about there. Pi, negative 2.5 might put me right about there. 5 pi over 4, negative 3 might put me right about there. And 3 pi over 2, you can think of it as 6/4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 6/4 puts me right about there. Okay, so it's a graph that looks something like that. And then it just repeats itself. Notice you can think of this as 2 pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, 4 pi over 4, 5 pi over 4, 6 pi over 4. So every pi over 4, I will be at the max or min or halfway between a max and a min. Next graph, another cosine graph. So let me graph the cosine, or y is equal to 1/2 the cosine of pi over 4x plus pi over 4. First of all, I need it in the right format. So I am going to rewrite that as 1/2 cosine. I'm going to factor out a pi over 4. When I factor out a pi over 4 from the first one, I'm left with just x. Remember, factoring out is like dividing by pi over 4. When I factor out from the second one, pi over 4 divided by pi over 4 is 1. There, it's in the right format. So remember, the cosine curve looks something like, and it repeats itself. That is my period. My period now is 2 pi over b, which is 8. So this is 8 over. Amplitude is a half, so it goes up to a half and down to a negative half. So that graph that I just sketched out very quickly is just that part of the graph without any movement. Now let me do my movement. The movement plus 1 is left 1. Left is negative direction. So I'm going in the negative direction 1. So I'm going to write my points from this original graph here first, and then I'll do my movement. So my original points, I start at a maximum, I end at a maximum, half the way through I'm at a minimum, so half of 8 is 4, I'm at a minimum, 1/4 of the way through I'm at a 0, so 1/4 of 8 is 2, I'm at a 0, and 3/4 of the way through I'm at another 0, so 3/4 of 8, 3/4 times 8 is 6. So there are my points. Now my movement. I'm going to do that in green since I circled it in green. I will add -1 in my x direction. There's no number out here, or there's no y minus a number. So y movement is nothing. So my new points are -1, 1. 1/2, 1, 0, 3, -1/2, 6 minus 1 is 5, 0, and 8 minus 1 is 7, 1/2. So those are the points that you would graph. And when you're graphing them, if I ask you to continue the pattern on a whole grid, just continue that pattern. Notice the x values between here, there's 2, there's 2, there's 2 between the x's. So it starts at a max, 0, min, 0, max, and then it goes back down to a 0. So at 9, 0, there's a point, and then it goes down to a min. So 9 plus 2 is 11, -1/2, and so forth. So there are the cosines.